people who built extraordinary businesses over decades, but when it came time to sell their business, they were negotiating across the table and playing a game that they didn't know the rules of. And they were unprepared, and they were getting their pockets picked by savvy buyers. What these owners don't realize is that when they're sitting across the table from a sophisticated buyer, I have never met somebody who will pay more for something than they have to.
I'm stunned at the amount of wisdom you've just dropped on us, just in those two scenarios. My name's Dominic Rubino. Welcome to the episode. I'm glad to have you here because today we're going to be talking about something very juicy, something you had to earn the right to take part in. Today we're going to be talking about how do management buyouts work. And listen, it is a juicy, spicy topic. I'm not sure if you've ever had the chance to study this, but I have a great guest for us today. His name is Tim Vorhoff. He knows how to buy and sell companies, whether it's family businesses, if you're running it solo, large businesses, medium businesses, small ones. Anyways, he's got a book coming out and I got a wind of it from my personal connections, let's just say. So I contacted Tim and I said, hang on, let's have you on the show, talk about this first. So if you're interested at all in management buyouts and what the future of this business looks like, if you're going to pass it on to family or your management team, you're going to get a lot out of today. So I had to go back and re-listen to the episode. Here's what I got. There's 5 or 6 different ways to sell all or some of your company. Now, on how a management buyout itself works, that itself is a sounds simple, 3-part model. So stay tuned. And stay tuned for the end of the episode because I'll go back and summarize everything for you there. We'll also talk about the Christmas water project. And as I said, a summary of everything here. After I went back and rehashed it in my mind and took a bunch of notes, I laid it all out for you in bullet points. It's super easy to follow, but I think you're going to appreciate hearing it one more time, laid out in order in bullet points. All right, that's enough from me. Let's get to the episode with Tim. Mr. Tim Vorhoff, how the heck are you?
I'm good. How are you doing, Dominic?
I'm good. I'm glad to see you again.
It's a pleasure to see you as well. I'm excited to be on your podcast. Appreciate the opportunity.
Yeah, I could tell you're excited since our last meeting, you've got a piece of heavy technology in front of you.
I know I invested in a microphone specifically for this conversation. Had to make sure your audience could hear me clearly.
Perfect. You knew how important our audience is. And they are important. Yeah. So for people who are listening on iTunes, this is on YouTube as well. And there you can see Tim's smiling face. Hey, you're here today for a very specific reason, which I think is overlooked for a lot of people, but for the people who are ready to hear this, it's kind of critical. We're going to talk today about how a management buyout works, right?
It's exactly right. It's a fun topic to think about from an owner perspective, from a current management perspective. There are a lot of fun considerations. When it works out well, it can be kind of a beautiful transition for owners that really want to enable that next generation of management. But it's not without its pros and cons, right? So we're regulated by FINRA, and I would be remiss if I didn't say that there are benefits and considerations to any kind of transaction you embark on. And my goal would be able to give some good insight on what those look like, things to consider, and if it is an appropriate option for the contractor listening in today.
Yeah, it might not be for everybody, right?
Certainly not. I think go ahead.
I was just going to say, in a sec, we're going to get into those benefits and options and pros and cons and just maybe even some stories. Now, you and I are both professionals, so we're going to scrub the names out of everything, right? It's always going to be Chandler and Monica or whoever the business owners are. But before I do that, I need to ask you a very, very important question.
And what's that, Dominic?
Mr. Tim Vorhoff, who the heck are you? And how is it you come to be speaking to all these forward-facing contractors all over the world?
Well, I appreciate that question, Dominic. So I work closely with family and founder-owned businesses, primarily in construction, industrial, manufacturing, any kind of trade services organization to help owners navigate an exit.
Crazy when I say an exit, you speaking to us here, isn't it?
Right. Yeah. When I say exit, you can think ESOP, management buyout, recap, a lot of big words, but there are a lot of different variables when it comes to selling a business. There's no one path. But I came up in investment banking. I was working in Houston at a firm called Evercore doing oil and gas investment banking, working for some of the biggest public companies in the world. And that was great, but I didn't have a relationship with the people who built the businesses. And when I left that job, I wanted to work more with those owners because I saw there was an incredible imbalance in the market. People who built extraordinary businesses over decades, they knew HVAC, they knew plumbing, they knew cabinetry. But when it came time to sell their business, they were negotiating across the table and playing a game that they didn't know the rules of. And they were unprepared and they were getting their pockets picked by savvy buyers. And that just rubs me the wrong way. I think the people who spend their lives building extraordinary companies deserve to have an extraordinary exit. And so that's the work that I do day in and day out, is representing family and founder-owned businesses, providing education, sometimes telling them things that they don't want to hear. Sometimes somebody's got to say it. Somebody's got to say it. And I really view it as my goal is, how can I give this owner enough information specific to them and their situation so they can confidently make their own decisions. And so to that end, in 2 weeks, I've got a book launching called Exit Right: How to Sell Your Company. And that has been an amazing labor of love to do that exact mission, to give owners what they need tactically to be able to sell their company. And I'm really excited for the opportunity to speak today about, a topic in particular, but thank you for having me on the show, Dominic.
I'm excited. And later on in the show, tell us how to find the book and when it comes out. But right now, let's focus on, you mentioned that there's a bunch of different ways, a bunch of different paths. Today we're talking about management buyout, but there's different words or terms or phrases. Keeping it to the level where, let's say nobody's ever heard of those phrases before, how do I choose the right path for me, and what are those called?
The most important thing for an owner to consider is, what do they want for the business, for their employees, for their family? And before we can have any success in a transaction, we need to know, what are we optimizing for? And if we start with, what are the owner's goals and objectives? Does he want to grow the company? Does he want to walk away and retire? Does he want to start another business and his current business is impeding time, money, and resources to do so?
Right.
Does he want to reward the employees that built his business with ownership? Does he want to be able to pass down this business to this next generation thoughtfully? We have to start with what that owner wants before we can begin pushing down a transaction. Because if I were to talk to somebody who specializes in selling HVAC businesses, they'll tell you the market is hot right now. Private equity firms are paying more than any other buyer. And I met with 3 or 4 HVAC companies, and if I say the word private equity in front of them, they're gonna kick me out of the building. And so we have to start the conversation with, what do you want? And until we clarify that, and sometimes the owners say, hey, look, I'm just trying to figure it out. In that case, perfect. Because there only are a limited number of options when it comes to what you can do with your business. And Dominic, I'm sure you're familiar with most of these. But to put it simply, you can sell all of it, which is a strategic sale. You can sell none of it, which is the status quo. And there's everything in between. If you sell less than 50%, it's called a minority recap. If you sell more than 50%, but less than 100, it's a majority recap. And that's short for a recapitalization, which is a fancy way of saying somebody's buying a piece of your business and you're holding onto it as well. That's what typical private equity firms do, because they want you to have skin in the game if they're going to give you a bunch of money and invest a lot of money in your company.
But staying is not, a lot of people, and we talk to them all the time because they're talking to us about growth, and growth means they have some sort of plan. They don't want to stay. Not everybody, but some of them are like, I just want a mic drop and walk out. I want to get in the RV and take off, or golf, or do mission work. Everybody's got their thing, right? But I love the fact that you started by saying, I don't have an answer. I've got to ask you a bunch of questions first. And depending on what you want, we'll go down that path.
So what you're describing, a minority and majority recap would not meet the owner's goals. So we can throw those out of the window. We don't need to talk about them. Some other option would be an ESOP, so an employee stock ownership plan. This is a very complicated transaction, but it can be very valuable for the owners whose sole objective is to reward his employees with ownership. And that's what he wants to optimize for. There are a lot of tax benefits and considerations, but it's very complicated and it could put a lot of administrative burden on the business. Okay. So we could spend hours talking about just an ESOP, but as an owner, just think, if I have more than 25 employees and my sole focus is empowering them to be owners, then it's worth exploring that kind of option. Then we have the management buyout, which is typically 100% sale of the business to select members of the management team. Okay. We could talk about that, and we'll come back after we've gone through all the options. The other is an internal succession, which I know you had an individual on your podcast talking about family business dynamics. And so that's often one generation deliberately transitioning to the second generation.
Very
and that is exactly. Yeah. Another one is what's called a dividend recap or growth capital, where you put debt on the business to either give yourself enough money to go buy a beach house or to allow the company to invest in specific areas of growth. So, for example, if I own an HVAC contractor in Austin, Texas, where I'm based, and I've been talking to another guy based in San Antonio, and I'd like to buy his business, but it costs $5 million. I don't have $5 million lying around. Well, if my company's big enough, I can go to a bank and try to get the financing from a lender to be able to acquire that business. And so that would be a productive use of capital.
Right.
And when it comes to capital raising, the message is always the same. If you have a good use for capital, the money is there. And so we have to start with whatever the source is, that's secondary to how is it going to be used? What are the results of this money going to have on my business today and in the future? Because that's how lenders or investors think about putting in their dollars.
Right.
How will it be used? Will you be a good steward of the capital? And will it have a return on the money that I invested?
I like how you're laying that out in really basic terms. So I like the Austin, San Antonio example. And I was just in San Antonio, by the way. So
I love San Antonio.
That's so nice there. So nice. Right. But yeah, so if I was to go to the bank, they would be at least open to a conversation. There's a bunch of factors. I understand that, to say, look, I need this money because I'm going to buy another cash income producing asset that's already up and running, has a team in place, has a market, has a brand, has trucks on the road, all that stuff. They'd be very open to that versus me saying, can you lend me some money? I'm going to go out and try and spend it and find a company to buy.
So the second, I would say you'd have a very low likelihood of getting the money.
Yeah.
If
I like how you said that. You still said it with an even emotional tone. You have a low likelihood of getting the money.
We're regulated by FINRA. I can't say yes or no or black and white. We need to talk about the gray, because nothing is yes or no. Everything is, it depends. And if you want to have more likelihood of success in raising money, in the example we gave, I would need to be able to tell a bank or a third-party lender, here's my business today. Here's how much cash flow I generate.
Right.
Here's what the combined business would look like moving forward. Here's what the total cash would generate. And here's my ability to pay you over time. So if I lend $5 million, I have enough cash flow to pay you back in 5 years. And my combined business will be more robust and more profitable, which makes it a better credit for you. And so this whole game of figuring out what option do you want, how much capital do you want to raise, it's a game of thinking like the person across the table. How can I understand what are the questions a lender needs to know and needs to have answered to give me what I want? What does a buyer need to have answered to buy my business and wire me millions of dollars?
Yeah. This goes back to what you were saying in the opening of the show, which is I'm sitting across the table having a discussion and negotiation on something I really don't know about. And we're not knocking anybody. I've been in the situation as well. I've never sold a company of X size or X structure before. And the first time I go into it, I don't know what I'm talking about. Everything seems like a big, scary monster hiding under the bed. But the brokers in the room and the lawyers and the accountants, it's just another Tuesday. Yeah, I've done it before.
Exactly. And I think the best business owners that I've worked with, they acknowledge where they're excellent. And then they bring in people who are better, smarter, more talented at where they're not. And so when it comes to pursuing a transaction, the business owners who I admire the most, they recognize that I know my business. I know how to grow it. I don't know how to sell it. I don't know the legal paperwork involved, and I'm not an accountant. And so I'm going to bring in the right professionals. I'm going to be thoughtful, interview several, bring them all to the table, have them compete for my business.
Yeah.
So I can build my dream team, because regardless of what an owner thinks, it takes a team to get a deal done. I take that back. It is easy to sell your company. There are millions of people who will take it off your hands tomorrow. It is hard to sell a company and maximize it along the objectives that matter most to you.
That's big. That's heavy stuff.
It's difficult. It takes a tremendous amount of time, coordination, effort, and just hustle. Like, I couldn't tell you the first thing about starting an HVAC business, although I've worked with several of them. I've never fixed an HVAC system. And so I would never go into one of my clients and say, hey, you're doing that wrong. I read online that this is actually the more efficient way to do it. And what these owners don't realize is that when they're sitting across the table from a sophisticated buyer, I have never met somebody who will pay more for something than they have to.
Right.
I've never gone into a nice restaurant and said, this steak is not expensive enough. Can I pay you more? I've never done that.
That's a really good analogy, by the way. Yeah. Everybody's trying to maximize.
People who are buying businesses make money one of two ways. The first, they buy it for one price, they grow it, and they sell it for more. Number two, they buy it for less than it's worth, and they sell it for more. Those are the only two ways they can make money. And if I'm a private equity investor or a strategic buyer, and I'm across the table from a business owner, maybe let me come back to that. So a lot of private equity firms, they market their ability to find proprietary deal flow, which means their ability to source owners directly outside of a competitive process. And what that means is we can buy businesses for cheaper because we can find owners directly And when we find owners directly outside of a competitive process, the value we pay is less.
Right.
And so what's some kind of insider baseball knowledge that we kind of will share with you and your guests today listening is that there are a lot of owners who like to proudly announce that I negotiated my own deal with a private equity firm. What insiders in the industry think when they hear that is
you sold for under market value.
You left a lot of money on the table because there's no world in which you beat that private equity firm at their own game.
Yeah. At the same time, and you've probably heard this as well, there are owners out there who don't want to freak out their staff, who would prefer to do a quiet transaction, take their big bucket of money and go away. And I understand that because it's hard and stressful to sell a business. By the way, it's still stressful to sell to a PE firm because
probably more so.
Yeah, they're professional buyers of businesses. So let's not kid ourselves. They're not there to make friends. They're there to make money. And
although I will say a lot of these private equity firms, owners often think they're going to get sharp elbows and those Wall Street guys, but they're charismatic, intelligent, sharp. They understand what it takes to build a business. They're some of the most sophisticated people in the business universe, and they're exceptionally good at what they do for a reason. And I'm not saying that these people are predatory because they're not. Most private equity firms are willing to pay a fair price for a good business. But the challenge is that one buyer is no buyer. And absent competition, it's very hard for an owner to push that firm to a point where they can't pay a penny more and keep them there. And I'm not trying to knock these groups because they're fantastic and they're very good at growing businesses and they are ethical and honest. But again, if you're not stacking your bench with the A team players and you're going up against the pro team, it's hard for you to win that game.
Yeah, I agree.
Just simply put.
Yeah. Hey, are you running a family business that just happens to be a cabinet shop or maybe a millwork shop or maybe you do closets, but you know what I mean? Finished wood trades. Well, we've created something just for you, business handoff checklist, because you know, and I know, family business is just a little bit different than any other business. So this is a tool, and we built this tool to show an owner like yourself how to have a focused conversation and make it a successful business transition, however you want it to be, right? It's your choice at the end of the day. So we've got a couple of scenarios laid out for you. I'll talk about them in a sec, but remember, this is a simple system for a very human conversation. And if you enter that conversation wrong, it gets spicy and it's hard to pull it back. So we wanted to have a no pressure way for you to talk about the family business. So if you want it, just text me, it's called the Family Business Handoff Checklist. Okay, so it's a PDF download, and that means you can have it in your hands pretty quick. There's a bunch of scenarios or situations myself and my coaches have seen. And so what we did in this document is laid out in really simple terms the different situations, or you might call them scenarios or paths. And then when you see that scenario or path, you can follow that path. But you can also see what other people might be doing in their situation. And that way you can mix and match as you need to. Hopefully that makes sense. It will when you see the document. So here's the scenarios. Number one, look, I know who's going to take over the business and they're ready to start now. Boom. There you go. Scenario number one. But the other thing we see sometimes is I know who's going to take over the business, but they're not ready to start now because blah, 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 whatever it is. Then we've got a situation where you just want to sell it, hand over the keys to your team and walk away. Okay, there's a path for that. And still other people want to sell it to an outside buyer. And I would hope cash the big check and head off in your RV, right? So that scenario is in there as well. And again, you just follow the path that makes the most sense to you and your situation. Here's the fifth scenario that we see. I want to keep the business. I want to run it for cash flow and I want to hire a GM. That may or may not be a family member. So there's a scenario there. And then of course, number 6, I call it the steam valve. I'm just not sure what I want, but I have to start thinking about it. So all of those things are laid out in this PDF. I want you to have it, especially if you have a family business and you're in the finished wood trades. It's called the Family Business Handoff Checklist. Long title, but spot on. Send me a text. My phone number is 315-903-7853. Just text me there and say Family Business Handoff Checklist, and I'll know what the heck you're talking about. And then we'll send it off. Well, that's why a show like this, it's free. Anybody can listen, whether they have a business or not. But you have to surround yourself with this kind of information. You've got a book coming out. You got to read, and no offense, your book and others like it. You've got to talk to coaches like me and other coaches like me, people that know how to turn around businesses. So you've got this full scope. And like you said, build your dream team. Be very intentional about, we're going to use this person as this kind of tool. We're going to use that person as that kind of tool, or company as that kind of tool, as a way to go forward. Because otherwise you're just randomly trying to bash your way out of a cinder block building.
And the good news is that as a business owner, you don't have to become an expert in everything. It just requires understanding what role do these different professionals play in my process? And what do I need to know to make sure they're doing a good job? The owner that tries to become the attorney, the banker, the accountant is the owner that drives himself crazy. What that owner needs to focus on is how can he effectively outsource and trust the professionals that he's working with and then drive growth at the company. Because during a sale process, that's when company performance is most critical. And where I see most deals fall apart is because an owner takes their eye off the ball and sales decline.
Of continuing to grow the business.
While they're in the middle of a sale process.
Yeah, and that's why you need to have a good leadership team in place, because without a leadership team in place, you can't focus on selling the business or buying other businesses while somebody else is running your existing business, correct?
Exactly. And that kind of leads into, the management buyout.
Perfect. I was just going to transition to that because we promised that's what we were going to talk about. So obviously people tuning in, again, whether they're listening or watching, how does a management buyout work? So maybe let's go down that path right now.
Yeah, so at a high level, what is a management buyout? It's when the key management team of a business acquire typically 100% ownership from the existing shareholders, and they become the owners of the go-forward company. That's what it is at a high level. The dynamics involved to pursue a management buyout, I kind of think of it in three phases. There's three critical factors to be able to pursue it. The first is value, which is often where most management buyouts start and end. What value can you agree to with the existing shareholders? AKA, what is the price I'll pay to buy the business? And there are several ways to go around this. You can get a third-party valuation firm to come in and on behalf of the owner and yourself, provide a fair value. You could potentially work with an investment bank who could opine on value. You could go online and use tools to figure out what is the value of your company. Whatever it is, that's often the hardest part, is what is the value that the owners are willing to leave the business for and that you feel comfortable buying it for.
Right.
Because if it's too expensive, nothing's a good deal. And if it's too cheap, then the owners aren't going to sell. So the first thing is value. What's the price that you can buy the business? And if you're able to get that locked down, then you can move to the second step. And the second step is how much cash do you have?
Now, how much cash does who have? The management team that's going to buy it? Because this is the first thing. I want to sell it. This is what I hear quite often. I'd love to sell it to my guys, but I know them. They've worked with me for years. They don't have the money to do this. So
let me give you a couple of examples. So let's say there's an HVAC company here in Austin, Texas, making $10 million a year in revenue. Let's say $1.5 million of EBITDA. Okay. And the management team and the current shareholders agree to a $6 million purchase price. So let's say roughly 4 times 1.5 of EBITDA. First step, done. We've agreed to a price. The next step is, okay, how much cash can these people scrounge up? And the first thing to look at is bank financing. So the SBA can provide a loan that goes on the business that can finance the buyout for the shareholders. So let's say in this case, they go to a bank and the bank says, I'm willing to lend you 2 turns on 1.5 million of EBITDA or $3 million. Okay, so now the management team has $3 million, and let's say they put a mortgage on their home, they ask friends and family, and they're able to put together another $1 million. So now they have $4 million in cash, and they need $6 million to buy the business. And so that gets into the third part, which is what I call the gap. How do you solve?
You see me smiling because I've seen these conversations before, and I can only imagine.
How do you solve the gap? And this is often where it's just difficult because there are ways in which you can solve it, but all of them require a collaboration with the existing shareholders.
Exactly.
And so, some of the things that people can do, I'd say the most common is seller financing.
Right.
So the existing shareholders get $4 million cash today, and then they give a loan to the company for $2 million that gets paid out very favorably. And so that now as the management team are the full owners of the company, as the company generates income, they distribute, they pay off that note over time. That's probably the most likely scenario. The next thing that people could do is real estate. So if real estate is part of the transaction, the owner can keep that and lease it back to the company. And that can remove some of the cash burden of a purchase price. And candidly, in most transactions, real estate is removed anyway, because the returns on real estate are very different than the returns on a business. Real estate is pretty much fixed, adjusted to inflation, and based on square footage and rent. Now, the returns on real estate are consistent, but the returns on a business are unbounded by those same restrictions. And so most investors, when they're buying a business, they don't really care about the real estate so long as they're able to have continuity and that it enables operations. They don't need, most buyers of businesses aren't in the real estate business. They're in the business business. They want to acquire HVAC companies, and owning real estate isn't a necessity for owning an HVAC business. It's a nice to have, and it can enable operations, but it can also limit growth when an owner thinks that I need to buy a massive warehousing facility in order to grow to San Antonio. That's not necessarily true. You just need a lease. And so the ability to think about remove real estate from a transaction is another way to help with the gap.
Yeah.
Other dynamics are like an earnout. So I'm sure earnouts they're complicated. And I don't.
The one that always gets me, because I've been offered earnouts on when I've sold companies as well. And I'm not saying they're bad. I realize going in eyes wide open that there are inherent, there's risks. There's opportunities as well, but there's risks.
What I tell owners is the only thing that counts is cash at close.
Yeah. What did you get for that last day, that Tuesday when you signed?
Everything else is risked, which means there's a non-zero likelihood it's worth nothing. And so if the deal on its own, day one, isn't attractive, I wouldn't do the deal.
Right.
Because earnouts are complicated. They can be adjusted. And if I'm selling my business to management and I have an earnout based on EBITDA, well, the management can cut expenses or capitalize certain things. There can be financial engineering to hit that number. If it's on revenue, then the company could grow at all costs on revenue while bringing on unattractive customers that maybe don't contribute to the bottom line as well.
Right.
And so earnouts are one of those things that are always a little bit fuzzy, but it is a way that you could help mitigate the gap.
Yeah.
So essentially, if management team hits certain thresholds, then they receive more equity is kind of the bottom line.
Yeah. The point here is there's no straight path.
Yeah. And there was one final piece, and I want to just touch on it for completeness. So seller financing, real estate, earnout, and then the third is rollover equity. So the existing owner doesn't need to sell all of it. But the trick is that the transaction has to be in a new entity. So think about that $6 million company. If the owner retains, let's say, just 50% for the sake of math, that 50% is $3 million in equity. But since it's going to be a leveraged transaction, if he rolls 50% of his equity, he's going to end up owning 100% of the pro forma entity because he's contributing $3 million. There's $3 million of debt in the new company and $3 million of equity. So let's say 25%. So $1.5 million. If he rolls 25% of his pre-transaction equity into the new company, he now owns 50%, right? And so there's that kind of equity rollover consideration that could also help structure the gap. So in this example, there was $4 million that the founders or the management team was able to scrounge up. There was a $2 million gap. Perhaps the management rolls, in this case, 1/3. That 1/3 ends up being 66% of the new company. And then there could be considerations for them to do another purchase down the line. But those are kind of all the ways in which you could solve for the gap.
Ways. And I think that what I'm taking away from you here, and I'm looking for you to correct me, is that if I do want to sell it to my management team, there's a way.
Yes.
There's a combination of ways. And by the way, this wheel has been carved out of stone before. We don't have to figure out the shape. Other people have gone down these paths, and you're an expert at, I would assume.
Other people have done the brain damage to figure it out.
Yeah, other people have taken the beating, so you can, but as long as I don't try to do it on my own, bring in an expert and figure out. I think the bigger question here is the entrepreneurial question, which is how can I sell it to my management team, if they're interested, or what does an exit look like for me if these are all my criteria? But if I approach it with what we would call an open-ended question, I'm more likely to find the right answer.
I tend to agree. I think, we started this conversation with what does the owner want? And a management buyout is one option. And the only world in which it makes sense is if the owner has a good management team in place. Otherwise, it's just not even an option. And for a lot of owners, that's simply not the case. And I think a good litmus test is if you as an owner listening in and thinking, died tomorrow, how would the company operate?
This is where we cue the ominous music. Dun, dun.
Dun, dun, dun. If something were to happen and they were unable to move forward tomorrow, would the company skip a beat? And if the answer is no, the company would continue to grow and foster, then I think that signals that there is a strong enough management team currently in place that could move the company forward. Now, there always will be a transition period, but that gut check is really important, because until that point, it really isn't an option.
Hey, do you want something? It's kind of got a funny title. It's called the Profit Pack, and we didn't even name it that. One of our coaches was talking to one of our clients, and I guess he was helping one of his buddies. He's like, hey, you got to have this Profit Pack. And he put together a package of downloads and shared it with him. So now we call it the Profit Pack. But look, it's 5 downloads. One of them's an Excel spreadsheet. The other 4 are PDFs. Here's what's inside the Profit Pack. If you want to, just text me and say Profit Pack. We'll send it off. Anyways, the first one's called the Ultimate Get Things Under Control Guide. Fantastic guide. It's going to walk you through all the things that are pulling you off your main focus daily. Then we've got the 1-hour job estimate calculator. That one is crazy. And I'll tell you, you'll know you need that report when you get frustrated at sending your guy to, let's say, Home Depot or Lowe's or somewhere else, and he comes back with an energy drink in his hand, and you get mad knowing, I just set that guy on an extra break. Well, you need this one, the 1-hour job estimate calculator. Then we've got the Healthy, Wealthy, Wise Planner, which we do every year. It's our big New Year's resolution planner. So you're going to want that one. And then number 4 is how to calculate my revenue responsibility per hour. This is a crazy number. This is the number that wealthy contractors learned at their kitchen table that you didn't get a chance to learn at yours. So you're going to want to get this one. And then number 5 is, where are my blind spots? It's a construction business reality check. Boom. There you go. 5 documents. They're all going to help you. If you want it, just say Profit Pack. And if you want it, send me a text. My number is 315-903-7853. We've got a lot of people's heads spinning right now too. But,
some of these things are I've never met an owner that doesn't know that they have to replace themselves. It's just hard, and it takes a lot of work.
And you don't know when. You don't know if it's this Tuesday or 65 Tuesdays from now. You just don't know. And that's the hard part, is when do you start to make that decision? Increasingly, and I hope it's because of the show, I see owners coming to me saying, hey, I've been listening to your show and I realize I've got 3 kids. Not all of them want to go into the trades. So I've got to figure something out here for what the future looks like, but I want my kids to benefit. That still goes back to your opening question that starts with, how can I ... right? But when you start thinking about it early, you've got a lot of time to maneuver the ship. If I think about it, and I'll be the impolite one here, if I think about it on my deathbed, I don't have a lot of time to maneuver the ship. And I'm not being impolite. I'm just being as kind and gentle as I can be.
That was putting it gently. I will give you kudos for that.
Okay.
And I think
it still felt hard.
When it comes to thinking about an exit, owners fall into 3 categories. One is some exogenous event forces a transaction. So I think of it as the 5 Ds: death, divorce, disability, disagreement, displacement.
Wow, that is so uplifting.
I know. I've got nothing but happy news for you.
All positives.
And I'll tell you, we have personally seen these things unravel businesses overnight.
And so have I, yeah.
But in terms of timing and exit, every business is going to exit at some point. And owners that approach us, they fall into one of these 3 categories. One is they're forced into a transaction, typically because those 5 Ds. The second is they're approached by a buyer with an offer and they just can't ignore it.
Yeah.
The third is that they're ready to do something and they've taken the time to figure out that now is what they want to do. A lot of owners don't have that luxury. And I'll tell you, we can touch on the unsolicited buyers because I think I have a strong opinion on that, but we can come back to that later. Regardless of what happens in either of those 3 scenarios, building a long-term exit plan will build a business that's more valuable. Often owners think about value in terms of revenue and EBITDA. When buyers look at a business, they take a whole lens view. Right. They're going to ask about management team, employee tenure, customer diversification. They're going to ask about the entire business. And to the extent you don't have those things, a buyer is going to discount the price they pay because they're going to have to assume the risk of finding your replacement. And that is a very real risk. Whereas if you have already homegrown that individual, given him leadership or her leadership, and they know the operations, well, that is all of a sudden allows a buyer to pay you more.
Right.
And so oftentimes these thoughts around exit planning, they can kind of feel sour, but exit planning done appropriately creates exit value. And so for the owners that don't want to think about it, at some point they're going to have to, because everybody exits a business at some point. It's just a matter of when.
That was a very nice way of saying it. It's going to happen.
At some point. And the more people prepare for it, the easier that transition is and the more the company can grow and endure. But without proper planning, we've just seen owners. There have been examples where we have seen, this isn't a contractor business, but I've seen $35 million deteriorate overnight because there wasn't a plan in place and things were entirely dependent on this owner.
Yeah. My heart is heavy right now with stories that you and I can't share, with just where we've seen it. And what were those 5 Ds again? Death,
divorce, disability, displacement, and disagreement.
Yeah. What's displacement?
Essentially, think about a business that is critically tied to a single location. So,
and then there's a flood in Louisiana or something. And
exactly. There's a flood and they're forced to move. Or I think in retail or restaurants, this happens. The lease rent gets up too high and they have to move. And the next location isn't nearly as good as the first.
Yeah. And so something fundamental changes.
Exactly. Yeah. And then the disagreement is disagreement amongst partners. And so they come to an impasse.
What world do you live in where there's disagreement between partners?
We've seen that one lead to a lot of conflict or a lot of transactions, candidly. I'd start that way.
Yeah.
One owner wants out, one owner wants to grow, one owner can't stomach investing more money into the business, the other wants to go all in.
Right.
And so that leads to a standoff and something has to be done.
Sometimes just a different place in life, all the permutations, all the situations.
And I have a story about that if you got
time. Please. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah.
So I was working with a concrete or slab pourer. And so they started off pouring slabs for McDonald's, these small concrete slabs, and it was 2 brothers, and they were so proud of their slabs. And over the 15 years, they grew from pouring McDonald's to pouring the biggest slabs in this state. State penitentiaries, massive public libraries, massive public schools, massive concrete foundations. And they became the best in the business at it. And one brother who was a CFO, he couldn't sleep at night because all of his money was tied up in this business. And the other brother, who was the sales guy, wanted to go after bigger and bigger projects, but he couldn't because his brother didn't want to continue to put their own money at risk.
Right.
And so in that case, we met with these 2 guys and we said, have you thought about a minority or majority recap where you can both take some chips off the table, retain majority control and control over your company, and then use what I like to call OPM, which is
other people's money.
You got it on the next stage of growth, which can help everybody sleep better at night.
Yeah. And so that's a good news story.
Exactly. And, oftentimes these disagreements lead to both sides getting what they want, as long as both sides understand that there is an opportunity for both sides to get what they want.
Yeah. Yeah. The key, again, I come down to it is you just got to give yourself, and I'm speaking to the audience here, please give yourself enough leeway of time. We all get given the same amount of time. Unfortunately, we just don't know when that cuckoo's coming out of the clock. We just don't know. And so if you're thinking about growth or if you're thinking about transition, the best time to talk to somebody, and it doesn't have to be Tim, it doesn't have to be me, but talk to somebody, is as soon as you're finished this episode.
Yeah. And, just not to plug anyone, but if you don't have a good wealth advisor, talking to one of those guys girls can be very valuable. And if you have a very valuable business and you're getting later in your years, a good trusted estate attorney could be a very good person to begin a conversation with.
Yeah. Just have to start surrounding yourself with that team.
Exactly. And it's hard to do that. I'll tell you this. I have never met an owner that was over prepared for a transaction. I don't think it's ever possible.
Say that again. You've never met an owner that was over prepared for a transaction.
That's exactly right.
Yeah. I know that in both, I've had 2 significant transactions and one that was just funny.
I want to hear the funny one.
So
I do.
I'm a kid. I'm in university, but just like first or second year, and I'm cleaning pools. The story about how I started cleaning pools is a story on its own, right? But I'm cleaning pools, and one day I'm there. I've got my Walkman. You're too young. You don't know what a Walkman is.
I know I don't know it from holding it or using one, but I do know what a Walkman is.
The cassette on my hip, just the whole thing. And I've got the pool pole in my hand, and I'm cleaning the pool. And sorry, I got to go back. I'm cleaning pools. And so one day I'm at it's not a pool chemical store. It's where you buy hot tub supplies. And I've got my arms full of like bromine and all this other stuff, right? And brushes. And somebody is behind me in line. He goes, "Hey, would you ever sell your company?" And this, Tim, you're going to laugh. I turn around. I'm like, "Yeah, 30 grand. That was, I don't know. I'm a kid. I'm in university." I just go, "Yeah, 30 grand. That's the end of the conversation. Okay, now I'm in the pool of somebody's backyard and I'm cleaning the pool. My truck is out front, which is how he found me. He comes around the corner. I don't know who this guy is. I've got the pool pole in my hand and I'm like, "What are you doing here, man?" And he goes, "Oh, chill out. He goes, "Will you take 28? And so I said, "Yeah, I'll take 28. So he bought like 6 or 7 contracts from me 6 or 7 pool cleaning contracts, and all my equipment, not my truck, but my equipment, like the pool pump and the stuff.
Yeah.
That was the transaction. And I am not proud to tell you, but I was a second-year college student, and
that's impressive.
I drank it.
Honestly, 20 and second. I've look as this is a tangent for sure, but I used to have a Bitcoin mining business in high school. So one of my good friends, he asked me to invest money so he could buy the machines the GPUs that mine for Bitcoins. Yeah. And at one point I had over $3,000 in Bitcoin, and I did the math, it'd be around $25 million today. And I laughed because there was no part of me that was ever not going to take that money and spend it on partying. Yeah, there was just no part of my 18-year-old brain that ever considered saving it and investing it. And so I rest easy at night because I was like, that was never an option for me.
Never a real option to do smart things with the money. But I think it kind of jaded me to the whole process of selling a business. I'm like, it can't be more complicated than this. Well, I'll tell you what. It's way more complicated.
Well, I told you, it's easy to sell a business. It's hard to do it and maximize the sale of it. There are plenty of people who take a business off somebody's hands. And you had mentioned something that earlier in the conversation that I wanted to come back to just because I thought it was a good point. A lot of owners that we work with want to get a deal done quickly and quietly. That's almost always a key thing. They don't want their employees to know, key suppliers, key customers.
I get it. It's risky.
But buyers feed off of that fear. They'll come into an owner and say, we'll get you a deal done quickly and quietly. You don't need to market the deal. You only need to talk to us and we will get a deal done. And I was working with 3 gentlemen who had an almond processing facility.
Almonds?
And almonds, like the nuts. And, they had been working with a private equity firm for 6 months to try to get a deal done. And their attorney introduced us, and all the pretext for the conversation is, hey, they're just going to educate you on your options. Here's everything that you can do with your business. And I'll never forget the CFO of that business at the end of the call turned to us and said, guys, we married the first girl we kissed. This is not what we want. This doesn't get us closer to our goals. And the deal that's on the table is not what we want. And so they paused the transaction. They told the private equity firm they were going to focus on some internal initiatives first. That initial offer was for $75 million for a minority recap. We touched on that earlier. Selling a sliver of the company. They're going to go to market in the next 6 months, and they're expecting a $225 million total valuation.
Whoa.
Over the course of 3 years.
Oh, so you weren't kidding when you were saying that people out there know how to, what did you say, self-sourcing deals?
One more example, and this one's dramatic. And it's not always the case, but it's a good example. There was a guy in Dr. Z. He had it's not contractor, but he had what you could call a life sciences business. He got approached by a strategic who he knew. He'd gone to dinner. They'd met his family. And he said, I'm going to buy your business for $30 million. And one of his advisors said, hey, why don't you meet with somebody to just sanity check this? And he met with an investment banker, people who represent owners in a sale process to help maximize the sale. And the owner said, the banker said, hey, look, you can do this deal, but I guarantee you they're going to retrade. They're going to drag it out. And since you don't have any leverage, they're going to keep pushing you until you get to the point where you're just tired and ready to move on. Because buyers have the luxury of time, and they know the longer you invest with them, the less likely you are to walk away, because walking away is the only chip an owner has on their side of the table in negotiations with one buyer. This guy, Dr. Z, said, I'm good. Thank you. I know I'm going to get a deal done. This was in October. He's like, our deal will be closed before the end of the year. Fast forward to May, Dr. Z got back in touch with this banker and said, my $30 million deal turned to $22 million. I'm sick of them, but I've got another offer on the table for $26 million. Can you just help me finalize this offer with this one buyer?
Right.
The banker said, sure. And in his research, he found a public company that expressly stated their interest in acquiring a business that Dr. Z's company was in. He said, hey, can we include this other buyer just for competition, to increase the friction, to push this other guy to at least stick to a timeline? Well, that public company ended up paying $60 million for this business.
Whoa.
A $30 million initial offer that went to 22, a $26 million offer, and they sold it for $60 million. That was all uncovered by just doing a competitive process. And an N of one is an N of none. If all I have is 1 point of data, I don't have any data. And this is something I really believe. It's that owners deserve to be able to understand what is the full market for their business. And once they see what is the full market, then decide what makes the most sense for me. Who do I like the most? What structure, what transaction, what group? But when they speak with one other counterparty, they do the disservice of figuring out, is this counterparty the right party? And until you've met with multiple folks, it's really hard to answer that question.
I'm stunned at the amount of wisdom you've just dropped on us, just in those 2 scenarios. And how many people are facing those things? And unfortunately, I know one person facing that scenario right now.
This is something that I am absolutely gung-ho about. It's why I wrote the book, because owners deserve to have an extraordinary exit. There are books, seminars, private equity firms, millions of dollars in play right now. Focus on finding business owners on a day where they're mad, they're tired of the business, and they get that email, hey, I'd love to buy your business. We have a lot of money in this sector, and they respond. And there are guides teaching people how to buy a business opportunistically. There are search funds trying to buy a business and grow it. There are all these people trying to get owners into their ecosystem opportunistically. And I want to educate these owners so they don't enter a transaction without realizing or being at least open-eyed into what's going to happen. If I can at least provide them that education and they decide they want to negotiate with a single buyer, then I'll sleep well at night. But I want them to at least understand what they're walking into.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Well, Tim, let's wrap this up here because you and I have busy days, but oh my gosh, I could keep going for hours. So much I want to ask you.
Me both.
Once the book comes out, why don't we have you back to extend our conversation? Folks, for those of you listening or however you're listening or watching on YouTube, leave comments about questions you have for Tim. But Tim, tell us how we find you. What's the name of the book? When's it coming out? How do we find it, etc.?
So the easiest place to find me is LinkedIn. So Tim Vorhoff on LinkedIn. The book is Exit Right, How to Sell Your Company. And in the next week or two, the website will be out and it's howtoexitright.com. And the whole goal is that it turns into an education platform. Everything that we've described, I am trying to get this into owners' hands. How can we teach them the proper way to exit a company that maximizes the things that matter most to them, and so that when they do sell, they don't walk away with seller's regret?
Yeah.
That's my goal, and everything is dedicated towards that end. And so that's how they can find me.
Nice. Well said. Well, Tim, I'm so glad that you came onto the show. I really am. I honestly feel like this could have been a 3-hour interview, but I'm not Joe Rogan and you're not an ex-Navy SEAL. So, there you go.
I am an ex-ultra marathon runner, and we could get into that at some point. I've run the same races as David Goggins. So those ultra marathons, my last race was 240 miles. So we got some things we could cross over there. We'll save it for another day.
Yeah. I so much appreciate you coming here and sharing your insight and wisdom. And folks, if you're listening on iTunes, leave feedback. If you're watching on YouTube, just tell us what you want to see. Tell us questions you have for Tim so that, Tim, you and I like to prepare for these things. So
Please.
We have at least a list of questions to go into the next episode with. And I just cannot tell you how much I've taken a ton of notes here.
Yeah, look, I love answering questions. So to the extent anybody's got anything that they're interested in or confused about or that they want to understand, I would love the opportunity to be able to answer those.
Hey, quick side question. What if I'm a manager and I want to buy from the owner? Do you talk to me too?
I do.
Or just owner? You talk both ways, if that makes sense.
Talk both ways. And those are often some of the most fun conversations because it's like, how do we get you this business? And it's tough, but the manager needs to have full confidence in their ability to execute, and they're going to have to take some risk.
Yeah.
If they're willing to do that, let's have a conversation. We can talk about the strategy because it still boils down to those 3 things. What's the price you can negotiate with the owner? How much cash can you put on the business and can you scrounge up? What's the gap and how can you solve for it? And the process be sitting down with that manager and figuring out those 3 things.
You got to be careful, Tim. We are going to go for another hour and a half here. My mind is just a million miles. It's so hot under my hat right now. It's not even.
Dominic, I couldn't thank you enough for the time and the opportunity. I think the work that you're doing is very valuable for the people who listen. And so thank you.
Thank you. All right. Well, I'll have you back again, Tim. Thanks, Matt. Thanks so much.
Excited for it.
Thanks. Bye-bye. Well. Tim Vorhoff, that was fantastic. Folks, I don't know if you took notes like I did. I took a ton of notes from today. I pulled out a couple of interesting power phrases. As I said, I went back and listened to the whole episode again just to make sure I bolted it down in my mind. One of the things that's really cool is what Tim talked about is one of the things that we have for you here as a download if you want. It's the 3 types of buyers for your contracting business. I'll tell you how to get that in a second. But the things that Tim talked about lined up exactly with my experience in selling some of my companies. One of the things he said is most owners built an amazing company and then they sell it while playing a game they don't know the rules of. I'll be honest, I know how to get businesses ready to be sold, but I've seen the sales process. You definitely want to be playing chess while the other side's playing chess because you can't be playing checkers while they're playing chess, if that makes sense. So what that means is you're going to learn the rules before you sit at the table. That's what you need to know. What are the rules for selling a business before you sit at the table? Now, even myself, having sold a couple of businesses, my coaches have sold businesses, my friends have sold companies. So you'd think I was in the know on everything. I'm not. I'm still learning every time. And when you get somebody like Tim, who's, sat through these, I guess, on both sides of the table a couple of times, obviously, Those guys know the rules. The other thing he said that really stuck in my mind, this is actually why I went back and dug through the episode. One buyer is no buyer. Think about that for a second. If I have one buyer, that's actually no buyer. So if I'm negotiating a loan, or if somebody comes to me and says, hey, I'll buy your company, I'm almost guaranteed to leave money on the table. So what Tim's talking about here, and I guess what you can get in his book later, is how to create leverage and protect your price. You want to make sure there's a bit of competition for your company. And then the third thing, and this is really the topic that we dug into, is about a management buyout, right? If you want to sell it to your team, or you want to sell it to your team, if they're not your family or your family, a management buyout isn't my guys don't have the money. It's 3 steps. What's the price? What's the cash? And what's the gap? And the gap can be solved. Just like we say in coaching, most things can be solved. There's systems. There's simple systems. You never have to think or feel like you're alone in this world. Other people have done this before, so why not take advantage of that? It would be foolish to think that you're going to go learn this all yourself. There's experts out there. Use the experts, right? So for yourself, if you want to sell to your team, this episode's going to show you the path, but of course, there's more studying you can do. Now, one of the things that's great here on this show is that we deal with lots of family businesses. You've got a family business maybe, right? Which is good or bad news. I mean, the good news is now that you've built this into a multi-million-dollar company, and for most of you, that's been from scratch, it means you start having to make strategic moves that sometimes take years to simmer and bake before they're ready. So congratulations, you built yourself a problem. I remember the first company I sold, and you're going to laugh, I think you guys have heard about this before, was actually a pool cleaning business. Don't ask, and I sold it by accident. And what did the guy buy from me? He bought my pool pump and a couple of accounts. There wasn't just a lot at stake there. I could have closed it and just gone back to school. But you've built, if you're listening to this show, you've built something real. You've got a team, you've got a client base, you've got a manufacturing plant or a warehouse. You've got a lot of assets around you. So you're not me as a high school kid anymore. You have something really serious that you can pass to your family. And you might as well pass them something that's working great, that's profitable, has predictability to it, instead of giving them some old jalopy of a business. So anyways, I hope you've enjoyed this episode from Tim. I've got a couple of more points for you here, but if you want to know the 3 types of buyers, this is from my perspective. Until Tim's book comes out, grab this from me. It's called The 3 Types of Buyers for your construction business. My cell phone number is 315-903-7853. Just ask for it. 315-660-2973. And just say 3 types of buyers, and then I'll send it off. The other thing that I think you should have, and this is only going to apply to some of you, actually quite a few of you, because we know that many contracting and construction businesses have family members working in it, or you have a family in the background that wants to get the benefit of everything, or you want them to get the benefit of everything you worked so hard at. And so the other download, the professional development tool that I think you should have, is called The 3 Biggest Mistakes on Passing a Business to Family. So what this is a series of case studies that my coaches and I have put together for you, right? So we've got 2 different downloads. One of them is called The 3 Biggest Mistakes in Passing a Business to Family. That one's the case studies. And the other one is The 3 Types of Buyers for Your Contracting Business. So like I said, one of them's case studies and one of them is The 3 Types of Buyers. By the way, I can tell you exactly how much you're going to get for your business when you go to sell it. Now, you might be surprised to think that, but I know with 100% certainty exactly how much you're going to get for this business. You're either going to get exactly fair market value, or you're going to get above fair market value, or you're going to get below fair market value. That's what your business is going to sell for. Now, what myself and my team are really good at is showing you how to get above fair market value, right? We don't want you getting below fair market value, but if you're selling to family, you want to just get at fair market value. Anyways, I'll summarize a couple things for you in a moment. I want to remind everybody that when you like and comment on an episode, you're doing a lot. So far, as a group, we've donated 2,650 gallons of water. It's going to be donated on your behalf. That's the same as thousands of ice cream cones of ice cream. I converted water into ice cream. Every single time you leave a like or a comment, it actually has a trickle effect. So thank you. So please leave a like or a comment on this episode or on any episode, whether it's on iTunes or whether it's on YouTube or any other podcast platform. You're doing something good in the world. We can track it. And on your behalf, I'm making a water donation to this community in Nicaragua. here's my notes that I took from Tim. Here's the different ways you could sell your business. I know this is a long outro, but I feel like we have to do it because there is just a ton of great info he shared. So the first way you can get rid of the business or sell the business is to sell all of it. So that would be a full sale. The next thing you could do is sell none of it. So just keep it the way it is, that status quo. And a lot of people do that. They sell none of it and maybe they just shut her down one day. That's your call, whatever you want to do. You can sell some of it. So that would be a minority or majority recap with an investor. That's some lingo right there. Minority or majority recap. Then there's an ESOP, which is an employee ownership. It's very complex, but powerful in the right case. And I know quite a few of you listening do ESOPs right now. There's family succession, which is debt or growth capital, where you borrow to grow or buy another company. And then there's the management buyout, which is the topic of this interview. So you might say, remind me, Dom, how a management buyout works. Great. Well, it's broken into 3 parts. Part A is value. What's the price of this thing? Part B is cash. How much money can management raise? So don't forget, if they can't raise the money, there are ways for them to raise the money. There's bank loans, SBA loans, personal funds. And then the third part is the gap. The missing money gets solved through things like seller financing. That's you, and that's most common. Real estate separated out, so the owner keeps the building and leases it back. There's earnouts. Now, earnouts have their pluses and minuses for sure. We talked about it a little bit there. We have the equity rollover, where the owner keeps a piece. There's a lot here. Listen, if there's anything we can do to talk you through this or get you ready to be sold one day, whether it's to family or an outside buyer, just send us a text message. In the meantime, grab those downloads that I was talking about. My cell phone number is 315-903-7853. And folks, you know, all of this is just killing time until you and I have a chance to finally grab a cup of coffee. I like Americanos. Grab a glass of wine. I like reds. An old fashioned. I like mine done properly, not the cheap ones. And then maybe we can go fishing one day. I don't know what it's going to be, but I look forward to the day we get to do that. That'd actually be good. You and I on a fishing boat, just chatting all day and trying to catch fish, trying to fool the fish instead of having them make fools of us. Whatever it is, I look forward to that, folks. Until the next episode, have a good one. We'll talk to you soon.